Hi, Jan. Hi, Jan
Hi.
May.
Hi, hello, Christy.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, Paul.
Hello, everyone.
You all look very smart. I dare to show my video, so I just disabled.
Okay. Now we can check who like our project and who.
Hi everyone, guys. We've just really great to see you on our webinar today. So Creative Spark initiative, Creative Spark project welcomes you here today. And Christina will introduce our lecturer, Paul Burns, for everyone who haven't visited our previous webinar. Christina, please go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Many thanks to you for being here. And I'm sure that you know the best speaker, but let me introduce him. He is an emeritus professor of entrepreneurship at the University of Bedfordshire, dean of the business school and pro-vice chancellor till 2015, academic accountant and entrepreneur. I hate this word. I can't spell it clearly. I'm sorry for this. Professor of small business at Cranfield School of Management, director of 3i European Enterprise Research Center, president of ISB, and many other awards, and author more than 30 books and hundreds of articles. I was impressed so much last time, and I'm waiting today's presentation so much. I hope you are as well as me. So Paul Burns.
Well, let me just say, the reason you've got a long sort of list of things I've done in my past is because I'm very old, right?
Oh,
I'm retired. I'm retired now. Okay?
It's because you're so experienced.
I'm so experienced, I'm retired. It's just gone over my head, overwhelmed me completely. But yeah, I've done a lot in the past. And I think the key point is I've actually been an entrepreneur, and I've taught entrepreneurship, I've researched entrepreneurship, I've written about entrepreneurship. So I like to think I've got a bit of a rounded perspective on it. And one of the nice things about getting old, there's not many good things about getting old, I've got to tell you, but one of the nice things about getting old is you can be a bit rude about people. So sometimes I'm rude about academics, Jan will tell you that. And sometimes I can be rude about theory. You know, theory is so different from reality. So I can be rude about those things because they think, well, he's old, he's doddery, he doesn't really know what he's talking about. Anyway, I'm going to use some PowerPoints again, and I'll flip in and out of these PowerPoints. I've just checked with Paul, and there seems to be a little bit of a delay on these. So when we flip out of a PowerPoint into either the video with me, indeed, I've got some short video clips to show you. There may be a little bit of delay. So I'll pause for a few seconds just to let the system catch up with me. So it's not the link has got down. It's not that I've died in my chair. It's just that. Okay, right. I'm going to start with the PowerPoint presentation, and we'll flip in and out of things from here on. And they're immediately, okay. That's me. Let's start with what I talked about last time we met. I talked about the entrepreneurial mindset. I talked about the character that entrepreneurs have. This little guy over here, and the character traits that they have. I talked about the discovery skills that you might develop yourself, 5 of them if you remember. And what I said is that if you practice these discovery skills, then you're bound to come up with a business idea of some sort. I left it there And the problem is that some people don't quite agree with me. You know, it's not that easy to come up with a business idea. And indeed, it's true to say that most businesses don't succeed. Most businesses fail. So what I want to do today is to try to, I can never eliminate the risk, but what I can try to do is reduce it, reduce the risk of failure, and show you some good practices, show you some theory, and we'll also maybe, I hope, have a little bit of fun talking about it. Ways of reducing the risk of failure. So, making that leap, what's the first thing I've got to say about it? I mean, if you're going to go into self-employment, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you've got to make certain that whatever the business idea you've got is based upon some very real market opportunity. So there's got to be a market there for whatever you're thinking of producing or selling. And the first thing you've probably got to do is to test out that business idea. You've got to find a low-cost way to test it out and get some customer feedback on it. Will it work? Won't it work? Do you have to tweak it one way or another? And one of the things I do know is that it is very few businesses indeed, very few businesses indeed, that ever get a business idea 100% right when they launch. That's just a fact of life. You know, maybe it's only God who ever sees that far ahead, but certain human beings don't. So whatever happens, you'll have to invest some time in finding out what customers think about the product or service that you're launching. And what we're talking about is a process of planning to build something, to try it out, to see what the market thinks about that product or service, evaluating it, and then integrating the results somehow into the original product. Trying again. And this process can go on a few times. What we're talking about is what's called launching a minimum viable product with just enough features to satisfy the customers. It's not perfect, it's far from perfect, but often many of the features of a product or service aren't really valued by customers anyway. So the idea here is to launch something that works, is good enough to show them what the benefits are to them, what the intended benefits are to them, but not so good that it incorporates all the features that you could possibly incorporate and costs you a lot of money. That is the minimum viable product. And then you get customer feedback and you alter it as you go on. So basically integrate more and more of what the customer wants. Now, at this point, I'm going to take you out of my PowerPoint and show you a short 1-minute video clip.
Interesting thing about the customer development process ties back into agile engineering and agile development hand in glove. Basically, it's this notion of the minimum viable product. Back in the old days, what we used to do is specify the entire feature set of the product from beginning to end. Now, this makes sense when you're in a large company releasing version 2.0, 3.0, and 4.0, because you kind of have a feeling of who the customers are and what they need. So a product manager can be pretty accurate about, you know, I've been interacting with customers for the last year and a half, and I think I know what they need. But in a startup, you're really kind of guessing. And the odds are you're going to be guessing wrong. So rather than waste a whole ton of time and money, why don't we actually get outside the building before we build something and waste a lot of engineering time and, more importantly, cash, because that's what puts startups out of business, is running out of money. We want to make sure that we actually listen to the people who eventually will buy this product. We want to make sure we satisfy their wants and needs. So why don't we just figure out how to build the minimum viable product? Build the minimum features in order to get feedback. Now, feedback could take the form of input and verbally, or they gave you early orders, or they gave you anything that was valuable in helping you come to closure of what should we be building in what order. And by the way, an MVP could be something as simple on the web as a wireframe or a PowerPoint slide, or for a physical product, it could be a physical mock-up, or it could be a working part of the system. But as you get more feedback, you could start adding more features.
So let me close down there and come back to, well, let me just, come back to the PowerPoint, I guess. Minimum viable product, what exactly is it? Let me give you a bit more of an example of what it is. You might think that it looks a bit like this, a four-stage process where you give the customer a wheel and you say, what do you think of the wheel? The problem with that process is it's starting with something that the customer doesn't understand. You should start at the other end. Start at the end with the car, stage 4. You want somehow to design a car that customers are willing to build. If you give them the wheel, most people can't see what the benefits are to them. They won't see that it ends up having 4 wheels. It ends up being sheltered. It doesn't even seem to move. They'll say, what do I want that wheel for? Even when you move to stage 2 on that process, it's got 4 wheels, it's got a chassis. But what does it do for me? What problem does it solve for me? And even stage 3, you've got a shell of a car. Where's the engine? Where's the wheels? What does it do for me? This isn't minimum viable product. Oops. I'm having a problem here. There we go. So that isn't minimum viable product. Neither really is this process. I mean, you're giving them something further down the line. You're giving them a scooter. Okay, what do I do with the scooter? It doesn't shelter me from the elements. Even if you give them a bike, it pedals. It doesn't need your foot to propel it along, but it doesn't have 4 wheels. It doesn't shelter me. So, you know, all of these stages here we're talking about involve the customer taking quite a substantial leap of imagination. And the blunt reality is that most people do not have that do not have that imagination. You've really got to start at the other end, as I keep saying. You've got to think of the car and then work back. So minimum viable product is more like this. You want to start with the car, work back to what costs you the least to produce that offers similar benefits to the customer as a car. You slim down on the features. So you give them something with an engine, something you can sit in, something with 4 wheels, and that basically is, hang on a second. Sorry, I think you're having the same problem as I'm having because all of my features are not working as they ought to. But in situation 1, what you've got is the minimum viable product, something with 4 wheels that propels itself along a road to get from A to B. It gives the customer shelter. The customer, when you take it out to evaluate it, might say, but I want something to carry my luggage as well. Fine. You add a luggage boot onto it. That's situation 2. And then situation 3, you've put out the truck for evaluation. The customers say, but I'd like to get my family in there as well. You come up with design 3, and they say, but. And that's where you start fine tuning. And for example, one thing on feature, on design 3 is it doesn't have windows that go up and down. They open out. Customers say, we want these windows to go up and down. So you alter it in incremental ways. So you can see there's a gradual progression from the original minimum product through 2, through 3, through 4. And that is the concept of minimum viable product. You can't start with something that is too basic. You're not starting a complete innovation process. You're looking at incremental changes to your original concept. So the first thing is, does your minimum viable product work? Is there sufficient traction with the marketplace that it'll convince you that the customers will want it? How many of the features, extra features, do you have to incorporate into that original minimum viable product to attract them to purchase the product? So, The next stage in minimizing these risks that you face is to do with basically looking at your business model. It's all well and good having a product that works. But I mean, we've got to focus not just on the technology, not just on the features of the product, but also on how we sell it, how we market it. So the question is, what is our business model? What is our marketing strategy that goes within that business model? What we're talking about is a number of stages. We're talking about who you intend to sell it to, who is your target market, because only by understanding who the target market is, can we then go on to say, what do they want? What do these customers want? What do they need? Now, let's just make a distinction here between features and benefits. The features of a product, well, the features of a car might be it's got 4 wheels. Right? That's a feature, but it doesn't necessarily give the benefits to the customer other than, well, the benefit would be it propels itself more easily between 2 points because it's got 4 wheels, it's stable, the wheels roll, reduce friction. So you're always looking at the benefits that the customer will get. It's people sometimes say, it's what problems do I solve with these features? So that will lead you to your value proposition. What are you selling to them? You never sell the features. What you sell are the benefits of those features, or the solutions to the problems that your customers have. So that is your value proposition. And it's very interesting. I'm doing a book at the moment, and I was pulling together a case study on Dropbox. And I came across, quite by accident, the original little video that they produced to demonstrate their concept. And this was before they actually had the technology working for Dropbox. They produced a little video simulation, animation, that showed what the benefits to customers of Dropbox would be. So, it doesn't have to actually be a physical product, as long as it demonstrates the benefits that the customer is looking for. So the next question is, we know who we're talking to, we know what we want to say to them, how are we going to do it? How are we going to communicate all of these benefits, all of these problem solutions to our target market? And that is part of your communication strategy. So we've got all of that in place. There's one essential element that's missing here. For most people, there are going to be some competitors in the marketplace. It's very unusual indeed, for people to have such a radically different product or service that they've got no competitors. We hope that the competitors aren't as good as you, but when it comes to customers, they may already be buying similar products or services from existing competitors. So why should they buy from you rather than from these competitors? And that brings us to the important point. How are you different? How is your product, your service, better than those of the competitors that you've got? What extra benefits differentiate you from the competitors? That's very important indeed, because those different benefits, or we might call them unique selling propositions, are the things that will really gain you customers in the first place. And actually, more hopefully, these will become customers who will repeat purchase. They'll become loyal customers. And what we really hopefully want is that they become advocates of the product or service. They love it so much that they'll say, don't buy this product or service, buy that one because it's better. So that is like gold dust. That is the holy grail of marketing. Getting your product or service recommended by other faithful customers. And I'll tell you why, because all of the research indicates that when you get a recommendation from a family member or a friend like that, you trust it infinitely more than a little bit of advertising that would have probably cost a lot of money from a company. It's all about trust. So if you can get loyal customers to be advocates of your product or service, that is the holy grail of marketing. Okay, So what goes into this business model? Business model typically comprises of 5 things. First of all, the target market and the value proposition. Clearly, those are linked. It consists of a marketing plan. Marketing plan is the marketing strategy. Typically, it comprises things like your communication strategy, basic structure of the product offering. It's often called the 4 Ps: product, price, promotion, place. Product, benefits of the product, promotion, your communication strategy, place, where you're going to sell it, distribution channels, I'll come back to that shortly, and price. And price is actually the most important and most difficult thing for most entrepreneurs to decide on. I'll be coming back to that also later on. So target market, value proposition, your marketing plan, but then you've got to say how you've got to operationalize that plan. What are the major operations in making that plan work? What are the things you've got to get right? What are the things you've got to avoid getting wrong? And all of that ties in with the resources that you might have and the resources that you might need. Not just talking about money. Essentially, most businesses are based on people. So do you have the right people? What skills do you have as an entrepreneur? What skills are missing? What sort of people might you need to recruit? So it is about resources in the broadest possible sense: people, money, things of that sort. And of course, this is the real world. It all boils down to being, to money. You know, you can hire people, you can recruit people, it'll cost you money. So we need a financial plan to go with it. Okay, so that's all well and good. That's what you need. You need a business model. The obvious question anybody's going to ask me is, well, I would hope you'd ask me anyway, is, are there any business model frameworks that I can use? Well, yes, there are. And I've got to recommend my own business model framework, which is this one. And this comes from one of my books, New Venture Creation Framework. It's the New Venture Creation book, and it's the New Venture Creation Framework. And it splits the business model into the 5 parts that I've already talked about. The market segments and value proposition, the marketing plan, the operations plan, the resources that you have and the resources that you might need, and then it links it all to the financial plan. So if you go back up to the market segments and value proposition, that's all there. It's combined with your customer relationships, because that is what you're really trying to establish. You're really trying to move them from being loyal customers to become advocates of your product or service. And normally that involves some form of branding. But let's not get hung up on words. Branding tends to be a big business word, but actually it isn't. My window cleaner, his brand is his name. I trust him to do a good job for me at a price that I can afford. That is his value proposition. He cleans windows, and his value proposition is he's not expensive, but he does a good job. His brand is his name. It's the same as Heinz, it's the same as any other big brand, Mercedes-Benz, whatever, except for him, it's very personal. And that is probably stronger, the personal brand name, than the big brand name. So your marketing plan here, the marketing mix, pricing, the channels of distribution that you might use, communication strategy, how are you going to communicate with that? And then there's another issue about scalability, and I put that in there because particularly if you're looking for funding, funders, banks, financiers of different sorts are going to be interested in the growth potential of the business. Then we come on to the operations plan here. We're interested in what are the critical success factors, what are the key activities that are in this and the risks that we face. Can we do anything to avoid those risks? Can we do anything to mitigate those risks? And that might create some strategic options for you. So we need to understand what are the critical success factors. That is very important, because those are the things that if you get wrong, the business may go bust, it may go bankrupt. So critical success factors are things you must get right, otherwise you risk failure. And if a business doesn't highlight what the critical success factors are, well, there's a fair chance it won't be able to cope should they go wrong. Over here we've got the resources again, the capital you've got, the human capital, the social capital, financial capital, but also the capital you then need. And that all gets incorporated into the financial plan. Now, this is not rocket science. There are other models available. All it is a framework to get you to think logically about what your business model actually is. And then play around with different strategies. Because I'll come to it in a moment, there are more than one very effective business strategies, business models that work. But let me show you how you might use this framework. At the end of this presentation, I'll give you the link to one of my books, the New Venture Creation book. And if you go to the student link there, then you can download this framework, and you can download a lot of other facilities that allow you to play with this framework. So let me just give you an idea, a flavor of how it works. So let me try to use this framework for a low-cost airline. Now, a low-cost airline in this country, one of the best known ones, is EasyJet. I'm certain you've got low-cost airlines in the Ukraine. Paul, you must have a name of a low-cost airline.
Yeah, we have several. It's Wizz Air, Ryanair.
Wizz Air, Ryanair, never travel Ryanair, they're dreadful. But I shouldn't say that, should I? Right, let me show you how this framework works. Thanks, Paul. One of the facilities we've got, if you download this as a PowerPoint, is to actually have these post-it notes. You just post ideas about the different elements of your business model. So here we've got the target market is the leisure and business travelers. The value proposition for a company like EasyJet, Ryanair, Wizz Air is safe point-to-point air services across Europe, consistent and reliable, appealing fares, value for money. So that is their value proposition and their target market segments. And their branding, well, it depends which airline we're talking about, but for EasyJet, everything is orange. It's very visible indeed. It's no frills, value for money. And because it's all very low cost, it places a great focus on internet-based relationships. So a lot of their internet-based services are really very effective. A lot of their internet-based marketing is very effective. So you can then post another post-it note on to the marketing mix element of your marketing plan. So they may have differential pricing, so they price the value of a ticket at different points when you purchase it. So as it gets nearer and nearer the flight time, the price may go up, or indeed it may come down, depending on the model that they're using. So they use low-cost marketing, they use PR, they use branding, web-based promotions, etc. They're looking to get volume seat sales, and they want to maximize their sales of related products. So if you're flying from A to B, might you need a car when you arrive at B? Might you need a hotel when you arrive at B? So all of these are elements of the marketing mix. Scalability, well, as they add destinations, new destinations, the business will grow. They'll add more planes and they'll need more staff for expansion. So all of these things you start seeing will accumulate to form your business model. Let's look at the key activities. We're looking here at basically getting as many passengers onto every flight as possible. high usage volumes. We call it in England, sweating the asset. You get the maximum use out of the aeroplane. And if you look at the times that somewhere like EasyJet is in the air compared to the flagship carriers, like in our case, British Airways, BA, it's far higher. So they've got very high operating efficiency, and they've got high operating efficiency, and they develop staff through recruitment and training. That's very important to deliver a good customer service, and it's very important for them also to have good supplier and partnership relationships. Otherwise, they won't get the hotels to sell, the car hire to sell on. Otherwise, they may not have the airport collaborations that they need. So partnerships are very important to them. Capital needed, well, they need planes. Interestingly, most of the planes these days are leased. That will reduce their costs. They need servicing facilities, all of these things. I think you sort of get the point. I don't have to go through this in detail. What I'm starting to do here is to build up the business model for a low-cost airline very easily, and in basically one screen here. It'll need expanding, of course, but what I can do is change elements. So if I want to change the target markets that I'm going for, I may have to change a whole host of different elements of my business model. But it works very easily. I've got a framework that will help me do just that. So that works really quite easily. Let me just break out of this for a second and pause to see if there's any questions. I can have a cup of tea as well.
No, right now I don't see any questions right now. So please, our participants, go ahead and ask questions. Paul is ready to answer them if you have one.
No?
Everything is clear.
Okay, at the end of the presentation, I'll give you the website address. You can download that PowerPoint. You can put those little post-it notes onto that PowerPoint yourself. And actually, having so few words on a PowerPoint is really very useful because it gets you to focus very clearly on what is the essence. What is the essence of what you're trying to say? What are the really important things? Get rid of the frills. Let's find the real important things you want to say there. So, okay, let me go back into the presentation and move on. Okay, one of the things people ask me again is, are there any best models that I can use? And let's talk about, well, rather than looking at this PowerPoint straight away, I've got to tell you that there's really only ever been 3 business models in life. And anytime you go to a marketplace, you'll see 2 of them in operation. So at one end of the market, you've got somebody saying, get your fruit and vegetable here, cheapest fruit and vegetables in the marketplace. Now this guy is selling on price. Over here, we've got somebody saying, get your fruit and vegetables here, freshly picked this morning, organically grown, best fruit and vegetables in the marketplace. He's selling on quality. Every time you go to a market, you see those 2 strategies demonstrated right in your face. And actually, basically, there is only one other strategy. And that's very simple. You don't go to the marketplace. Instead, you go to the customer. You go to the customer, you knock on the door and you say, I sell fruit and vegetables. Depends whether you're a high price, high quality, or whether you're a low price, low quality. You say, I sell high price, high quality veg, freshly picked this morning, delivered to your door. Can I sell to you? Can I come back next week and deliver another box to you? Can I become a regular supplier of you? That is a customer-focused strategy. So really, there's only ever been 3 basic strategies, and they all work. They all work perfectly well. And they translate into this little thing I've got here. So, one end, we've got somebody who is focused on low cost, low price. Okay? He has got, basically, he has got he's got to have high operating efficiency. He's got to be the most cost efficient producer in the marketplace. So his operational efficiency is very high indeed. And only that will give him the low cost that enables him to offer a low price. Over here, we've got the quality producer, fresh, organically grown produce. High quality product, highly different, high differentiation from the other guy in the marketplace. So here we've got two extremes from left to right on the screen. And then we've got the third variation, which is about customer focus, customer intimacy. So if I knock on the door, if I get to know the customer, well, I'll tend to know what they're looking for. That is high level of focus. Our market trader over here, he's got no idea who the customers are. He doesn't know what they want. In fact, neither really does this guy. So if you've got low customer intimacy, low customer focus, you're down here. So really we've got this little chart here. So we've got the three things I've talked about. Low cost, high differentiation. Customer focus, no customer focus. And that translates very importantly into price. The better you know your customer, the more different you are with your product or service, then the higher the price you're likely to be able to charge is. And this is called the niche business model. And it's the opposite, absolute opposite down here, where you're selling an undifferentiated product without a customer focus. That really is your market trader who's selling on price. He'll sell to anybody who comes along, but he's no different to anybody else. He's just selling on price. The more different you are, the better you know your customers, well, the higher the price you're able to charge. But it does involve you knowing the customer, right? And that's not just about knowing them, it's also about forming a relationship with them. Because remember I said, the best recommendation you get is not through advertising, but through a family member or a friend recommending your product. Well, if you're knocking on the door, if you're familiar with your customer, you become a friend, you form a relationship with them. And the customer will begin to trust you. And that's easy when it comes to sole traders, one-person businesses, because it's a person-to-person relationship. It's far more difficult with a big company. And that's where the brand comes in. Okay, so that's how you're able to charge a higher price. And one other thing, all of the research tells us that the businesses that start out using this niche business model are far more likely to succeed than these. That doesn't mean that all of these strategies don't work. They all work. I mean, you will find companies operating, well, your market trader, as I said, you'll always find two extreme opposites of strategy in most marketplaces. You've got EasyJet competing against the flagship carriers like British Airways. One is low price, one is high price. Better service, better quality service, we hope. So there is a place in business for all of these different strategies. And the reality is that they cater for different market segments. And that is why their business models are different. So there may be more than one business model apparently focusing on one market segment. But the reality is that there's more than one market segment there. Now, I wanted to give you an idea. I wanted to give you a practical example of this. And I was thinking of what could I find that was a real commodity. And I don't know if I said this to you, but I was last in the Ukraine about 25 years ago, long time ago. It's changed a lot. But one of the things I remember was potatoes. I believe you got rather a lot of potatoes in Ukraine. Yep. And I believe that at the end of the day, whoops, let's go back. I believe at the end of the day, those potatoes are pretty well a commodity. We probably agree that they are just a commodity and not much else. Well, I've got to tell you a little story. We grow a lot of potatoes in the UK as well. And they are a commodity. There are different types of potatoes, I know, and some are better for some things than others. Some potatoes are better for chips, crisps, whichever you call them, and some potatoes are better for mashing and baking and whatever. Well, I'll tell you a little story. There is a gentleman who I shall introduce you called William Chase. And at the age of 20, he bought out his family farm from his parents. And his parents' farm grew, yes, potatoes. Now, this didn't work too well. So by the age of 28, William was not doing very well at all. In fact, he went bankrupt. He went bankrupt because price of potatoes goes up and down. You probably realize that, quite volatile. But around that time, we had a couple of really bad winters, and his potato crop was ruined. So at the age of 28, he found himself bankrupt, which was very sad, to say the least. And he went off to Australia for a year because he didn't like the notion of him being bankrupt. He made some money there. He came back to the UK and was able to borrow more money again to buy back his family farm. But he wasn't very clever at this point. And guess what? He started growing potatoes again. And as we said before, potatoes are not a terribly valuable crop. It's pretty well like a commodity. And he started selling to supermarkets. And the supermarkets, whilst they guaranteed to purchase his potatoes, they discarded a lot of them because they weren't terribly pretty. They were not the most attractive potatoes to sell. And he realized that he was heading for bankruptcy again. But in selling these odd-shaped potatoes, he found he was selling them to the United States. He didn't quite understand why they were buying misshapen potatoes. So he investigated and he found out that they were going to a company that made very much upmarket crisps, chips, if you would call them. And he thought this was a tremendous idea. And he invented, if you like, in this country anyway, the very much upmarket crisps. They're called posh crisps. And the brand was Tyrrell's. And Tyrrell's crisps are thicker than normal crisps. They're hand cooked and they come in very attractive packages. And by the way, they cost twice the price, at least twice the price of other crisp packets. So the one you see on your screen cost originally £2, which is about 66 grivna, I think. And he only sold those originally in very high market, upmarket shops like Harrods, Fortnum and Mason's. They got to be very popular indeed, and other supermarkets starting to want to buy them. So much so that 10 years later, at the age of approaching 30, William Chase sold out the business for over £30 million, making crisps, different flavors by then. Also, he fried different vegetables, but he sold it out for over £30 million. Now, this is where I quite like this case study because he didn't sit on his laurels at this point. He'd moved from potatoes to undifferentiated commodity to a niche product, a very high-priced bag of crisps, sea salted crisps, sold through very upmarket outlets, shops, at a very high price. And now he was a millionaire. What did he do? Well, he was still living in his farm. So he went on to make vodka. And as I'm certain you know, you can make vodka from potatoes. So he started making very upmarket vodka. It's distilled, I believe, 119 times in a very elaborate process that, again, makes it very much more expensive than other vodkas and about twice the price of other vodkas. And again, it's something that is now sold in very upmarket outlets, shops. And he then extended the product range into gin. And this is where I quite like it, because I found out that Chase vodka actually sells into the Ukraine, which, knowing the Ukraine from 25 years ago, I find quite humorous. But let me just introduce you a little bit to what's going on here with another video shot.
Meet the Chase family, Will, Harry and James. They're potato farmers. Now the Chase boys do something a little different with their spuds. They pick them, peel them, mash them, then ferment them. 2 sleeps later, and you've got oodles of lovely spirit, which is heated in Fat Betty's big copper belly. Her brother, Maximus, then purifies and distills the spirit, leaving only the heart. That's the good stuff. The end result? Award-winning field-to-bottle vodka. Now then, did you know that gin is made from vodka? We scour the globe looking for the loveliest botanicals. Juniper, coriander, cinnamon, and many more are all infused inside Ginny, Fat Betty's little sister. All those delicate flavors, handcrafted to perfection, and then enjoyed across the globe. It's all in the Chase.
So forgive me for introducing that little case study, but I thought it was quite humorous. We've actually got an English company exporting potato-based vodka to the Ukraine. And we have a phrase. In England. It's called taking coals to Newcastle. Newcastle used to be the center of our coal mining industry. So taking coals to Newcastle was taking coal to a place where it came from. And I suspect taking vodka to the Ukraine is a bit like taking coals to Newcastle. Okay, let me continue. I want to talk about pricing. I've just shown you how you can move from a commodity supplier to a niche business. Well, I didn't show you. William Chase showed you how you can do that. But actually pricing is probably the most difficult decision that most startup businesses have to make. And you've got a couple of benchmarks in deciding on prices. First of all, clearly you've got to meet your costs. That is all important. And if you don't meet your costs, then you're going to go out of business. But what constitutes a cost? Well, that can be a little bit of a problem because most businesses have some overhead costs, fixed costs, that somehow have got to be allocated across however many units you produce. So if you've got a restaurant, you've got a very high fixed cost of the building, of the waiters and waitresses, of the cooks. Those have somehow got to be allocated to obtain your full cost. The variable cost, on the other hand, for our restaurant is simply the food that it produces and sells. So variable cost is perhaps another benchmark for any business. Now, once you start selling below your variable cost, the cost of the food in the restaurant, well, let's not put it any other way. That's stupid. Because every time you sell food at below the cost to you, you're making an additional loss. That is crazy. On the other hand, you might just want to sell food or anything else at above the variable cost in the hope that you can get more and more customers and move up here somewhere. So those are two benchmarks that you don't want to fall below. And the third benchmark you've got is something to do with the marketplace. What's the going rate for similar products or services? So here we've got 3 benchmarks. But really what we want to aim at is something like the average value to the customer. What is the customer willing to pay for this product or service? And that's very difficult indeed to ascertain. You go into a marketplace trying to understand what the customer might be willing to pay. That's only as good as the benefits that you articulate to them. You tell them about the benefits, not the features, the benefits. What problems are you going to solve for me? Now that means if the bigger my problem, the more I can charge. It's no coincidence then that, let's say, a plumber has a regular set of charges for his regular services, and they're probably around here. But if you've got a water leak in your house, you're probably going to be very willing indeed to get him out to your house as quickly as possible and to pay a premium for that. So the value to the customer is a very subjective thing, and it depends upon the problem you're solving for them and the value of the solution for them at the point when they buy it. Now, it's a difficult one. It's a difficult one to ascertain. Indeed, it can get even more complicated because many businesses charge different prices for apparently the same service to different customers. As we've just said, our plumber might charge one price for regular customers, but another price to other customers. And perhaps customers who, like retired people, like myself maybe, he gives an additional discount to. Overall, these 3 different segments that he sells to average out to a very respectable earnings for him. So it is a complicated concept, but it is one that I want to explain a little bit further to you because it's important and because it relates somehow also to the other elements of your marketing mix. And I want to just link it to the distribution channels that a business might decide to use. So let me go into another example. Paul, would you know what a sofa bed is? No. Okay. Paul?
Yep.
Would you know what a sofa bed is?
Yeah, sure. So
okay.
we use it in Ukraine also.
Okay, I'm going to take as an example a little company who I've worked with many years ago that used to make sofa beds, and they sell through large furniture outlets like the one we see on the right side of the screen. But I guess, let me just give you a demonstration of their bedding just in a moment.
We sell the best sofa bed in the world. You can try it or buy it online or come into Tottenham Court Road and see it for yourself. The reason why it's the best sofa bed in the world, it's got a fantastic sleeping platform, a proper mattress that's the right width, double width, the right depth, and most importantly, the right length for a sofa bed. So it closes very easily, all the cushions are integral to the mechanism, sits wonderfully, so it can still be your main sofa containing a permanent bed. And when you've got guests coming around and you need to open it, that's the best bit. Very easily. With a great mechanism, fantastic mattress, the best sofa bed in the world.
So that is, as you can realize, a sofa bed. No excuse for not knowing. Now I want to set up a little situation for you, a little scenario, and I want to give you some numbers that are quite realistic in terms of the UK marketplace and my experience of selling through larger outlets. So typically our sofa bed manufacturer here is going to be selling these beds at around £250 into a large furniture outlet. £250, I think, is about 8,250 hryvnia. The cost to him of actually making it is about £200. That includes the mechanism for the sofa bed, materials, the cushioning, and importantly, the labor that goes into it, because all of the laborers in this industry are paid on a piecework basis. They're paid by the number of sofa beds they manufacture. That's an industry standard in this country. Most of these companies are very small companies indeed. The margin they therefore make on this is quite small, 20%. On the other hand, selling into this big retail outlet, the cost to them of the sofa bed is about £250, same price. But they will sell it at a markup of 3 times. That's about £750. It's about, well, it's just under 25,000 hryvnia, I believe. So their margin is 66%. Now, that's what they'd like to sell it at. Of course, you know as well as I do that these sort of outlets frequently have sales on. Now, what I want to do here is to demonstrate how important pricing can be for deciding on the business model for a company. Let's have a look at some of the mechanics of this pricing. Here we've got a situation where there is a 10% decrease in the selling price. The selling price goes down to £225. Costs stay the same, but all of a sudden his profit is halved. Now, this means that if he wants to make the same amount of profit as he was making before, he has to double his volume of sales, increase his sales by 100%. Wow, that's enormous. Now, probably impossible. And let's just think a moment about any small business that is not making the sales targets that it thinks it ought to make. The first reaction is often reduce prices. Yeah, reduce prices. Well, look at that. Just to make the same amount of profit, they'd have to double their sales volume. Most small businesses don't realize that. Let's have a look at this other business here. A 10% decrease in the selling price for them, down to £675, same costs, decreases their profit to £425, but they only have to increase their sales by 18% to make the same amount of profit as before. 18% is far more easily achievable than 100%. This, of course, is one of the reasons these people have sales, because they can afford to do it, because they've got a high margin here. And of course, they can afford to discount it, if they really wanted to, all the way down to their cost base of £250. They'd be stupid to do that. They wouldn't make any profit, and their overheads with this big shop, with its big advertising budget, and all of the staff, sales staff that have got to be there, and the lease costs for the store itself, well, they wouldn't be covered. But it's got more flexibility. First point. Let's take another scenario. This time, let's look at what happens if there's a 10% increase in costs for a little low margin sofa bed manufacturer. So same selling price, the costs have gone up 10%. In this case, disaster is on the horizon, because this time, this guy has got to increase his sales by 167% just to make the same amount of profit as before. 167%. Almost impossible. Well, I would bet you it would be impossible. Now, what are the implications of this? The implications of this is that because this person, this company, has such a low margin, 20%, it's got to be fixated on its costs. It's got to have very tight cost control. Every penny has got to be controlled tightly. Now, some of the costs in most businesses aren't under the control of the owner-manager. The entrepreneur doesn't control them. So any costs here of materials, say, imported from China, from India, wherever, if there's exchange rate fluctuations, which causes costs to go up, well, he's got a problem. He might face almost impossible demands to increase his sales volume, and his better option, of course, is to try to increase his selling price to the end user here. But what is their reaction going to be to that? Well, if their costs went up 10%, look at this. 10% increase in costs to these guys, £275. They've only actually got to increase their sales by 6% to cover that increase in costs. 6%. Not a lot. Let's just think about that a little bit more. Now, if our manufacturer decided to increase his costs so that he could improve the quality of his sofa bed, customers may well be willing to pay the extra money for an improved quality sofa bed, in which case he wouldn't be looking at an increase in sales of 6%, he may well be looking at an increase in sales volumes well over 6%, because customers value that improved quality. Now that could make us, our low margin manufacturer, think again about how they react with the big retailer here. They need to have a constructive discussion about what the end user wants. Do they want quality? Do they want low prices? Rather than necessarily being in competition with each other, they perhaps need to communicate better and form some form of partnership. But we haven't quite finished there yet either. Let's take it one stage further. And let's look at what would happen if our retailer can, our manufacturer can increase his selling price by just 10%. It's not a lot, 10%, sure. We saw how little the retailer, how little it affected the retailer. So they may well be tempted to try to increase their selling price if they increase their costs. Now look at this. The price goes up to £275, but actually in this case, our manufacturer can afford to have a sales decrease of 33%, and they would still make the same amount of profit as originally they made. In other words, their sales would be 67% of its original value. That's an enormous drop in sales. It means that if they're working a 6-day week, they'd actually only have to work a 4-day week. All for the sake of a 10% increase in sale price, which we saw from the previous slide didn't affect this guy up here that greatly. So there's a lot to play for in these negotiations. Just to complete the analysis, one thing you can see here is a 10% increase in the selling price for our furniture retailer means that they can afford to lose sales volumes of 13% and still make the same amount of profit as originally they made. So again, perhaps increasing the selling price for both parties is something that they need to investigate. Okay, one final point, one final slide perhaps. Let me take another scenario, because having looked at the effect of an increase in price, selling price for this small margin manufacturer, they may be very tempted not to sell through the retailer at all, but instead to sell direct to the public. Remember the original situation. It's up there on the top left-hand side. Selling price 250, cost 200, the margin was 20%. Let's say that they are tempted to investigate selling direct to the customer. And let's put in what that means. Let's say they sell it for £400 to start with. The original costs 200. The profit they're then making is £200. Now, in which case, they actually can afford to have a sales volume decrease of 75%. 75%, enormous, and they would still make the same amount of profit as they were making originally selling to the big retailer. If they can sell it for £500, and remember the retailer was selling it for £750, and these are quite realistic prices, they're industry averages, so they're selling it for £500, they could afford to have a sales decrease of 83% and still make the same amount of profit as they originally made. Now, it's not that straightforward, I know, because if they take the selling direct business model, then they're going to incur a lot of extra costs. They're going to have to advertise, promote their products in ways that the retailer did. They're going to have to fund delivery of the sofa bed to end users, all of which is more trouble and a lot more expense. But at least understanding the financial engineering of the business gets them to think about how they might alter the business model that we talked about earlier. And it's all about finding out what business model best suits the customers. Remember, it's the business model that counts. What does the customer really want? What can the customer afford to pay to solve their problems? Okay, thank you.
Guys, do you have any questions?
Sorry about the numbers. It's important.
No, numbers were really clear. So yeah, it's an interesting. So okay, I have a question really. So is there any recommended profit range for a product in a small business? I mean, like a red line that you shouldn't cross. So 10% is too small or 20% is too small.
Every industry has its averages, and you can find those out relatively easily. Big retailers like the furniture warehouse place, they try to get 60, 70%. They rarely achieve it. The best they ever achieve is 50% probably. And the reason for that is because they've got very high fixed costs. So the higher the fixed costs, typically the higher the margin. The lower the fixed costs, and therefore the lower the variable costs, the higher the variable costs are, it tends to be the lower the margin. That's the way it is. So each industry has industry norms, and that reflects the amount of overheads each industry has. But superimposing all of that is how different any particular product or service is compared to the average in the industry, how better you are. I mean, a car, you can get a very cheap car, or you can pay hundreds of times more for a vehicle that gets you from A to B because it's got a nice badge on it and it's got better performance, leather seats, whatever. Customers will pay whatever customers are willing to pay. There are no norms for that.
Mm-hmm. So it depends, yeah.
But you can find out what the industry average is very easily. I can tell you, well, it's no use telling you what they are in the UK, but there are industry publications that give you that sort of information, and certainly exist in Ukraine as well.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I have one more question about niche. So, is there any proper way to choose it for your business? Is there any models you can use to find it?
Well, lots of companies can find a niche where nobody thought there was a niche before. What you've got to do is get rid of the group thinking approach. You know, there's a dominant logic in many industries about what's the best way to do things. And sometimes not having that dominant logic, coming to it cold and thinking, why don't you do things a different way, gets you to assemble the building blocks of a competitive strategy differently. So in the UK, I'll give you another example. I mean, the airline example was one where you've got low cost versus high cost flagship carriers. In the UK, we've got retailers that sell branded perfumes and cosmetics at very high prices. But equally, we've got a company called Lush that doesn't sell cheap cosmetics, but it sells on different things. It sells on the fact that they're not tested on animals, that they're not excessively packaged, that they are very frank and honest about what goes into them. You go into the shop and the people serving you will tell you exactly what the ingredients are. So all of these things make it quite a friendly environment and very different to the upmarket image of many of the cosmetic shops that they're apparently competing with. But again, it's a slightly different target market. So you can make yourself different. You can make yourself a niche retailer very easily. And the more points of difference that you've got, the more difficult it is to compete against you. The other thing is, of course, physical points of difference are easier to copy than non-physical. So service businesses, it's difficult to compete against service businesses if they're good at the service that they give. That's difficult to compete against them. But, you know, who's the first person to buy a new car that comes out? It's the competitors. And they take the car to bits and they find out what's better than their bits. And then the next model that they come out with, they've rectified all of those points of difference because they're physical things that they can copy easily. Points of difference that are personal, maybe service, more importantly, yes, thinking about it, relationship-based, my window cleaner. You can't replicate that. That's a personal relationship of trust between him and me. Yeah? Those are the things that are like gold dust.
Thank you, Paul.
How did you like the potato case study? I thought that was cheeky.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, really, because it's interesting because in Ukraine, the spirituous alcohol made from the potato is perceived as a low quality and not tasty. So
it's amazing,
strange.
Isn't it?
Yeah, selling it to Ukraine is really strange. So personally, I've never seen this product on our in malls and supermarkets. So
you don't shop in the right supermarket.
Maybe.
I don't know who they sell to.
I have ever seen this product in our supermarket, but I will find it.
Well, I think the difference. 25 years ago, I had some tremendous hospitality whilst I was in the Ukraine, but I was treated to, and I use it loosely, treated to vodka that some distilled for themselves. And I have never, ever had a bad head in my life. This Chase brand, I am told, because I can't afford it either, I haven't bought it, very expensive. It's distilled 119 times. It is so pure. Anyway.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you, Paul. It was so interesting. I'm impressed.
My pleasure.
And I'm happy that our marathon catch such great speaker as you.
That's kind of you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Guys, I have a small announcement for our participants. We have recently launched an online course on financial entrepreneurship. I will share a link to this course the way you can register just in the chat.
And when we will send you link to this webinar, we will send this link for this course, I think, as well, yeah?
Yeah, when we will share the video of the webinar on our YouTube channel, yeah, we will share it with you and also the link. So you can check the link right now or later. So the financial course starts, it's already started from Monday, but you have a chance to register till 10th of June.
Do you have any questions? Oh, thank you.
Okay, guys. Yes, thank you for your attention. Thank you for participating. Paul, thank you again. It was very interesting, very nice. So hope to see you again on our webinars. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure, my pleasure, really was. Anytime I can help, I'm here.
Thank you.
Thank you for everyone. Thank you, Paul. Thank you to Pauls and Christina from the UK side.
Thank you, guys. Bye. Have a nice day.
Okay, bye. Have a good evening, everyone.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
For participation.